Hello everybody, Lehman Crafton, aka Zorvalachan, Less Than Guru, is back with my second reality, so the third part of the original Torg settings series review, and immediately Mars hears me and decides that he needs to see what's going on. So today we're going to talk about the Nile Empire. The Nile Empire is seen by a lot of Torg players as kind of the best realm. And it's a mixture of just how interesting the realm is, all the different types of characters you can be from this realm that could be very, very different, as well as game mechanics, which I'll have to do a little bit on the settings so you kind of understand, but I won't do a deep dive into it because that's more for the mechanics video that I'll do for original Torg. But the Nile Empire's High Lord is this person here, which is really cool. So he even looks awesome. Dr. Mobius, also Pharaoh Mobius, and he has a very wild and interesting backstory, which I'll get into as part of this deep dive into the Nile Empire. So the Nile Empire, when you're looking at different types of genre, what genre is this? If I want to play a character, or if I'm a game master and I have a player character from this reality, or if they're going into the realm of the Nile Empire that's taken over part of Core Earth. What is this? So if you watch the first reality I did, Living Land, it's pretty straightforward. It is a primitive reality that has dinosaur-like creatures and lizardmen. And it's kind of a one thing. And a lot of Torgs, usually realities in Torg, usually take two things or more and smash them together to make interesting realities that aren't just completely cliche, even though they do have cliches within them, but they're interesting twists. And what the Nile Empire is, it is kind of based off of two major things. One is in Egyptian history and pulp comics from the, say, 30s and 40s. Although some of the power ranges gets a little shady and they kind of maybe get a little bit into Silver Age power. But it's a pulpy comic, so it's very Indiana Jones-ish if you want to think about movies, or the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser. It's that type of pulpness where there's lots of action, lots of drama. People can go through crazy situations and come out unscathed, and it's just a really fun cosm. And it has that overlay of the 1930s and 40s pulp, and that's what the tech is. The tech is a Tech 21, and it is kind of a 1930s, 40s. I always see it as a right before jet fighters and right before atomic bombs, rockets, things like that. So where for me as a game master, where does Tech 21 end and Tech 22 start? Tech 21 ends at, say, the beginning of World War II, where the end of World War II would have switched over to Tech 22. But one of the things that you can bring into this is, where is that absolute definitive thing? So maybe Dr. Mobius, and this is what happens in Torg Eternity, he's not quite sure where the atomic bomb is. He's not sure if it could actually work, and that's one of the things that kind of is a defense against him, is his not knowing exactly where that line is. So we have a realm that has an Egyptian influence, so magic and religion is based off of the Egyptian, and it's not a straight historical, our Earth historical Egyptian religion, but it's an alternate Earth. And the alternate Earth of the Nile Empire is known as Terra. So a lot of these alternate Earths in cosms, they're their own separate cosm, will have names that are basically what other civilizations and people have called Earth in different languages and stuff. So here it's Terra. And basically the history of Dr. Mobius, the High Lord, is kind of, like I said, a wild and wacky thing. And it starts back 3,000 years previous to the Nile Empire currently. But Dr. Mobius isn't 3,000 years of experience, I'll say. Basically, he was an illegitimate son of a pharaoh. And for whatever reason, that pharaoh, instead of completely shunning him, kind of liked Mobius, who is known as Sutenhotep. So he he had Sutenhotep, Dr. Mobius. I'll just say Dr. Mobius because Mobius is much easier to say than Sutenhotep. But Mobius grew up with being able to have a lot of those teachers and mentors that a pharaoh would have, that the higher classes of the Egyptian society at that time, 3,000 years ago, would have. So he grew up learning mathematics, and he was very good at mathematics and astronomy and engineering and things like this, basically what the science was. But unlike Core Earth now, the magic and spirit was pretty high. So you could, if you were there, you could do magic, and the Egyptian pantheon, you were able to invoke miracles and things like that. And he took a very good he had a very good understanding of that and took to it very well. And he was kind of raised to be a what can I say, an advisor to the legitimate son, the legitimate heir to the pharaoh's throne. But at some point, when his father died and the other pharaoh became, or the legitimate son became pharaoh, Mobius didn't think that he should be the pharaoh, that he was incompetent and not as good as he himself would be as a pharaoh. So he killed his brother, fratricide, and became pharaoh. And at some point, and I didn't read this whole thing for this review. I did thumb through it to make sure that certain things I say are correct. But at some point, the Egyptians overthrew him, and in the classic, like The Mummy and other TV shows and stuff, they basically took over, revolted, and mummified him and put a curse on him. But he still had a core group of followers. So over the next 3,000 years, his cult kind of were trying to basically resurrect him. And it's one of those tropes of every 1,000 years there's a alignment in the planets, and the right time and the right sacrifices and the right rituals were done. And they brought him back. And when they brought him back, it was the early 1900s, early 20th century on Terra. And he had 3,000 years of knowledge that he did not he didn't know. So he went out and ended up in the Americas and started learning all the new science and stuff. And at this time, belief has a lot to do with what is real and what that reality is able to do. So people had kind of stopped believing in ancient Egyptian deities, or deities in general, as being able to do miracles. Science had kind of supplanted magic. So the tech had went up to that 1930s, but the magic and the spiritual axioms had fallen in that time. So he learned all this science. He, like I said, he was good with mathematics and good with engineering and science of his time, along with the magic and spiritual stuff. But now that had fallen, so he went right into science. And one of the tropes of the pulp genre is weird science. So he got into really weird science, and for some reason in the back of my head I want to say he invented it, but when I did my look through before I started this video, I couldn't find that sentence, and it might be in a different book, but I couldn't find that section where it said he did this. You know, he was the inventor of weird science, so I can't go there, but I will say he definitely was one of the bigger people in the whole weird science and getting weird science started and getting weird science kind of to be a big thing. And we do have a pulp superhero or pulp hero genre part of this, so there were heroes and villains. And actually, if we want to break down what the 4 axioms are, as I said, tech is 21, so that is that 30s, 40s type technology. And then we have social of 20, so it is early 1900s, and so democracy and republics and things like that are able to be done, and people can communicate, and you can have mass warfare, and tactics and strategy work pretty well. The spirit axiom, I believe, let me check just so that I don't say anything wrong. As much as I just looked at this, there's always that, since Torg Eternity sometimes changed some of the axioms, I really have to check to make sure that I don't say something incorrect. So the spiritual is 17, so 17 is pretty high. You can invoke miracles, you can call down power of your deity or deities and be able to invoke a miracle. And magic is 12. So magic isn't super high, but it's not like Living Land 1. It is still something that you can have magic. You can cast spells and things. And the Nile Empire is interesting because that magic and spiritual axioms of the Nile Empire is not what was on Terra. So I'll come to that as I go through my what happened to Dr. Mobius. Pharaoh Mobius. So there are a few world laws of Nile Empire, like there is the law of morality, and I would keep thinking alignment, but it's like alignment, but it's called inclination, and you have to be good or evil. There is no gray area in between. You're a hero or you're a villain if you're important, and they have the mask, mask heroes and villains. You can even go off of it's more cynical, but even like the first Watchmen, a group that type of thing with the masks, vigilantes, but they're heroes. You have to be good or evil, and even trying to do something shade of grayish could cause a contradiction, could cause you to be disconnected, just because they don't accept that you have to be good or you have to be evil. So Dr. Mobius, being evil, he became a supervillain, a masked villain. As you can see, it's kind of more like a cowl that hangs down, even kind of reminiscent of Cobra Commander. He has the Eternity symbol, if you can see that on it. That's what he chose as his symbol. So he is doing villainous things as a 1930s villain using weird science gadgets. And in one of his acts of villainy, he comes across some clues, and he follows those trails of clues back to Egypt, modern Egypt. And when I say modern, I mean it's modern on Terra at that time, so 1930s Terra. And he finds the Nefertiti idol, which is an idol of the Egyptian god Sebek. And the idol says, "I am Sebek." And it's a darkness device. And that's how he gets his darkness device. So his is an idol, and it makes him a High Lord. So then he's High Lord Mobius, or Dr. Mobius, or Pharaoh Mobius, depending on who you're talking to. And so, or you can just say Mobius to keep it simple. So Mobius has a curse. One of the things that is his curse and also with his reality being a pulp comic reality, good guys win, he is kind of destined, I won't say to lose, but he will lose. And he can never take over Terra. Part of the curse was because he sought to rule. He killed his brother so he could rule. The curse is he can't rule on Terra. So he leaves Terra and uses the darkness device and possibility energy, and he takes over another cosm and drains it. And that's his first empire. So over the course of 30 years, so even though he's technically 3,000 years old, but mentally not, because when he was a mummy, had been mummified, he didn't have a consciousness going around. Once he woke up, he had to go out in the world and learn, but he's extremely intelligent. He's known as a mad genius, so he takes on the mad, weird scientist trope of comics, and he is super intellectual. And he uses that, and he goes, and over the course of these 30 years before the time of the invasion, and he takes over 9 other cosms and drains them of possibilities. And with all this possibility energy that he takes, he boosts the axioms of his reality. So as he goes from cosm to cosm, he ups it back to where kind of it was when he was a pharaoh, but because he likes the weird science and stuff, he keeps the tech also high. So he has that 17 spirit, that 12 magic, which are higher than Terra, but he keeps the Terra 21 and the Terra of 20. And actually that even kind of skews a little. And in a future video, I really had time trying to figure out, do I want to include Terra with this, or do I want to make another video? But I'm just going to make another video because I know Nile Empire is going to take a while. It's already 17 minutes. So Dr. Mobius connects with this darkness device, mad genius. He runs rampant all over these 9 other cosms, which is considered very fast in how other High Lords can take over cosms. It's considered that he did this thing very, very fast. So the Gaunt Man contacts him, just like he contacted the other High Lords, and is like, hey, I got this plan, this cosm that has a ton of possibility energy, more than you have ever encountered before, and invade this Earth with me, and we can share the possibility. So Mobius decides that he will do this, and he lands in Africa, and northwestern Africa, around where Egypt is, and he expands like the most out of all the High Lords. He just whoosh, goes out. And one of the things that allows him to do this is his weird science has allowed him to make what is known as reality bombs. And normally, as I said, you have to plant those stelae, and that's your realm, and you can keep as a High Lord, you can keep your reality within those. Well, he had these bombs where his World War II type fighters could fly, and the tech was lower than our Earth. We have jet fighters and stuff, so he's able to fly these fighters, drop these bombs, and they explode, and instead of doing tons of damage, they hit that area with an area of his reality, of the Nile Empire reality. So just as if those stelae, an axiom wash and a reality wash comes over and changes people and strips the possibilities out, etc., it hits, and that area is under Nile Empire reality. And then it's very easy for him to go in and set stelae down and convert the people, because they've already been kind of converted. So he's just then forming a definite boundary, and he just expands crazily. And the other High Lords that invaded are like, wow, this guy is like super expanding, but what is he doing? Because think of North Africa. It's lots of desert. It's lots of uninhabited places. And possibility energy is within people. So he basically took a bunch of stuff that doesn't benefit him, or does it because he's a mad genius. So you always have to wonder what's going on in his mind. And that's one of the things. He comes up with these convoluted plans that are can be, and again, as I said previously, over the course of Torg, things started going really into camp. And when you have a comic book pulp comics setting, it's easy to get into the Batman TV series of the 60s. So things rapidly go camp, but a lot of people like this because it is based on comics, and it's not just like, let's make a primitive reality go camp. It is, let's make comics go camp. But it also brings up the Egyptian religion. He brings that with him. As I said, he upped a couple of the axioms, and some of the world laws that go along with it is the law of action. The law of action is, Storm Knights sometimes can use their possibility energy to add an extra die to their roll, and the law of action allows him to even do that more so. And so people loved being from the Nile, because in the original Torg, you weren't just affected by the reality that you were in, you were also affected by the reality that you're from. So where the living land character couldn't do anything when they were in other lands, they didn't have any bonuses mechanically. When you went there, the Nile Empire, actually, those characters had a bonus wherever they were. And that was another appeal to being from the Nile Empire. And then there was the law of drama, which meant, and I might have these two flipped. I did look at it right beforehand, but they're really close in name, drama and action. So just to make sure that I didn't, let's go world laws. Yes, the law, okay, so no matter what I said before, the law of action is the law that allows people to spend more possibility energy and to even make bigger rolls. And then the law of drama means that things are always going at a breakneck speed. So if the game master at any time feels that the players are just sitting around too much, talking too much, they can add drama to it. So this is where you get things like you have characters haggling over prices in an open air market, and the game master is just like, we are in the comic, the pulp comic thing, we need some drama going on. Then some shock troopers show up, and tables and barrels start rolling and things like that, just crazy stuff, and action just piles and piles, and there's chases through things. I mean, seriously, if you watch any type of Indiana Jones or the Mummy movies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So basically those are our world laws. So the law of inclination, which is you have to be good or evil. And even if you're a Storm Knight from a different reality, if you go into the Nile, you have to be good or evil. You have to be a hero or a villain. Or good or evil, I guess I should say, not hero or villain. You could be an evil hero or a good villain depending on things that you do and what type of background you have. And then, again, if you try to do anything along those shades of gray, you could disconnect. You could have the Everlaw of One come in and say, no, you can't do that because you're good. You can't lie to anybody. It doesn't matter what your justification is. You are not allowed to lie because you're good. Boom, you're disconnected. So there is that thing. So a lot of things that players could say, try to justify. And one of the things when I ever think of justification, as soon as you try to justify something, you're trying to find a loophole. It's not true. It's the same thing as technical. Oh, it's technically. Well, if you have to say it's technically, it's not, and it's not obvious, then no. Whatever you're trying to say, you're just trying to wiggle your way through things. So that's a good game master tip. So on this, you have to do, if you're good or you're evil inclination. And so it's a very big, very powerful realm, and people really liked it. You could have lots of different characters. You could have the 30s gangsters with the Tommy gun in the guitar case or violin case, whatever it happened to be. But you could, do that. You could be the gangster. You could be a mathematician or engineer magic. And one of the things that's interesting in the Nile Empire is both their religion and the magic doesn't work exactly how it does in the other realms. What happens is they use astrology and planet alignments, and planets are named after the Egyptian deities. So you figure out where the alignment of the planet is, and then that can give you a bonus, or you have to align a certain amount of planets, figure that out, and there's rules for it. It sounds really complicated, but it's not too complicated. It's just like an extra little step towards your either your magic or your miracles, invocation or casting. But you could do that. So you could be like an Egyptian themed priestess, or an Egyptian themed mathematician or engineer that does magic but in an Egyptian type way. You could also have powers. You could have those, you shoot energy rays from your hands, or you're stronger or faster, or x-ray vision, flight is allowed. But the for the pulp powers, not for the magic or spells, but for the pulp powers, they come at a cost. So before you play, you have to spend a certain amount of your possibility energy to have those powers. Otherwise, you lose them. And so that's one thing, that there can be really powerful characters, but they come at a cost. They're taking away your resources. And that possibility energy in original Torg counts both as doing neat things during the adventure. You can use them, as I said, to add to your rolls. You can use it to find a different reality. If you take damage, you can find a different reality and choose yourself from that reality that didn't take the damage or took less damage, depending on what you were able to do and how much damage you got hit with. And for the currency for advancement, so they counted as experience points in original Torg. So when you had points, and say you get between 5 and 10 points at the end of an adventure, depending on how complex and cards you had and things like that. If you had 3, 6, 9, depending on how many powers you had, possibility points that needed to be spent to just keep your powers and be able to use them, then that was resources that you had to use. You got these cool powers, but it was the balance was you had to spend these resources that the other people didn't. The other people could use them to up skills and up attributes and do cool things during the adventure along with the cards. And you had less of those if you went the superpower route. If you went the magic or the priestly divine way, then you didn't have to worry about it, but the powers you did. So basically, Mobius has this big mix-up of, tanks and fighter jets and weird science and superheroes and Egyptian religion and Egyptian magic, and it's a really cool type realm. And it's interesting because I'm at 30 minutes and I'm trying to think. I mean, it's pretty much there. I guess I had to kind of describe Living Land a little bit longer of the hate that people had to it. But that does kind of show one of the things why people loved the Nile Empire and hated the Living Land. You could take the cool thing about the law of action into the other realms, and if you were in the Living Land, you couldn't. And how fun is it to be in an Indiana Jones world where you can be heroic? This is the heroic. When I had my whole big rant about cinematic versus heroic, this is the heroic world. It's even stacked against the villains. The whole reality is stacked against the High Lord, which is pretty funny. So you do have the High Lords that go off into monologue, or the villains who go off into monologues and things like that, and then you're able to defeat them. But then you have it's a comic-ish, so you defeated them, and they might not, or they'll come back, and you're heroes. So if you've defeated a foe and they're not dead, you're not going to kill them. That would be a contradiction, because heroes don't kill helpless people, even if they're villains. They call the police and lock them in jail, and then the villain escapes. So you have that type of thing. Now, one thing that is, and if you read this, think and have your session 0 with your players, because this is a 30-year-old book and concept, and there are stereotypes and there are caricatures of other cultures in here, because they really went with we're going with a 30s and 40s comic style. So you get, and Terra is a Earth. It is an Earth, so it has different cultures. But as an example, if you have a Nile, you could have a Nile Empire, say, ninja or martial artist, but they're going to be a comic book martial artist. So you really have to watch how far, don't go off and just go with stereotypes and caricatures of these martial artists making high-pitched sounds when they're trying to be, stealthy, or, doing martial arts maneuvers and stuff. Just, we're living in 2020. There's, a more incorrect sensitivity over diversity, and over just not bashing and making fun of different cultures that aren't our own. So do watch that. There are kind of things, especially if you get into the novels about some of the people from the Nile Empire. But you can kind of cut all that stuff out. Be sure to populate your Nile Empire with more than just Al Capones and thugs, because it takes place actually in North Africa, in Egypt. So there should be, Egyptian and African people in there. It didn't just take over Egypt. Like I said, it went really big. It went all the way down to I think like Zaire, and as far over as like Libya and stuff like that. So do take the modern sensibility, but still the Nile Empire can be an extremely fun realm for both players and game masters. And if you do come from an adventure with the Living Land where your players are just frustrated because they've lost a bunch of stuff, or they getting lost all the time and kind of want to have a break, bring them into the Nile Empire, get their emotions and feelings up. And I'll use an example, because I could stop now and I would have said all that I want to say, but I like giving examples of things that you might not think of. So in my personal campaign, we had a time where the adventurers went from a Tharkold, which is a techno-horror realm, to a dark part of Isle. Isle is the high fantasy realm. And then into the cyber papacy, which is a techno cyberpunk game with a Catholic Church-like structure built on top of it. So there was a lot of dark, grittiness for a very long time. And then I took them to the Nile Empire, and it didn't immediately click. And this is a story. Yes, it is from Torg Eternity, but the Nile Empire, that type of action and everything is completely the same. So there's no difference. So this could fit very well into Old Torg. And there's a villain known as the Hooded Cobra. And to subject you, to some of my voices, my character voices, basically I wanted to show immediately that boom, you're in a different realm, and you're going to have a lot of fun because we're in the pulp comic realm. There's a villain known as the Hooded Cobra, and he has a cobra thing, and instead of just taking the one straight from the the Torg books, I went and got on the internet and got a picture of Serpentor from G.I. Joe, and dropped that into Roll20. I play on Roll20, and showed that picture to everybody, and everybody like starts freaking out because, you know, instantly they have that type of thing in their head. And I even have him when he arrives with his shock trooper little army squad to fight in a museum. You know, he comes in and it's comic bookish, and he yells out, you know, something to the effect of "Surrender now, 'cause I am the Hooded Cobra," kind of like the G.I. Joe cartoons. And then instantly everybody understood that no, we are no longer in one of the gritty realities. We can just go over the top and go crazy with it. And it was a super fun session, and they stayed in the Nile for a while, and then they left because Storm Knights go to different realities. But you can always bring in that comic book and even cartoon series and stuff. Anything like that you can bring into the Nile Empire and get that feeling to give to your players, instead of just, you know, saying, oh, you're in a pulp comic now, and this Hooded Cobra comes down and he's acting all weird. And if you think like the Batman TV series of the 60s, or you think G.I. Joe, he kind of looks like Serpentor. No, you can actually like bring it down and use your knowledge of comics and cartoons and stuff to really bring that stuff out. So that's pretty cool. So we're at 40 minutes. I think I pretty much discussed the Nile Empire. You got Dr. Mobius, a ancient pharaoh who was mummified, who got resurrected, became a villain, a masked villain, and learned and was one of the founders, if not the founder, of weird science. Got his darkness device. Within 30 years, took over 9 empires, cosms, and then the Earth is the 10th empire. And he's a mad genius. He's crazy. He comes up with weird science stuff. He's 15 steps ahead of the heroes. He loves his monologues and things like that. So you can have really fun characters. You can have a great time. Just do beware, you might have everybody want to be from the Nile Empire. And that's one of the things that I've said in the other times, is I always avoid the Nile Empire because I know everybody wants to be from it, and I like being contrary and trying fun things from other realms. But you can be all of those types of characters. You can even pick a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and have an Egyptian weird scientist who invokes miracles and casts spells and creates weird science devices. I guess that's one thing I can add, and it's like, why does he keep adding time? Oh man, he could have made this one so short, just because I love Torg so much. There's actual weird science rules on how to make weird science gizmos and gadgets, and what's the difference. And they have a flow chart, and you get components, and you can roll to see how well you did, and things like that. So it's a whole system. I will say it's not as close to perfect as the spell creation system, but it is pretty decent. But you do kind of, again, you have to look, and you might have to determine if you want to put restrictions on how many possibilities might be able to be spent, or how many, if you allow your players to use cards, because the rolls have a lot of meaning. And if you roll really, really, really well, you could have an item that ends up being a little overpowered. So you might look at what you can do. And as part of my booklet that I showed in the very first settings of my rules and my downtime system, and I don't remember which one of the 104s or 107s or whatever that weird science was under, but I did have a limit to that. Other game masters, it's fine if you don't have a limit. Just be aware that you can get some really, really powerful items, weird science gadgets, in the hands of your players' characters, the Storm Knights that you're running. and you might need to take that into account. But okay, I will end. It's right at 40 minutes. If you like, you can hit the like. If you dislike, you can hit the dislike. Nile Empire, the best reality of old Torg. Thank you very much. And until next time, I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zorval Chan, less than Guru.